Why cities need self-storage. That's the subject and much more of today's The Commercial Real Estate Report, empowering you to build generational wealth with real estate. I'm your host, Chris Berg, head of business development at Abernathy Holdings. We build Class A self-storage sites in California, Arizona, and soon to be beyond. Very special guest today. Been involved in storage for a long time. Steve Mirabito. He is the president and founder of Storage Pro. And Steve, it's great to have you on the show.
Hey, thank you so much, Chris, for welcoming me.
So I know we want to dive into this conversation around the moratoriums that are happening in California. Perfect timing for you and I, because we've been trying to set this up for a while. Tonight in Indio, there is the possibility of Indio lifting a moratorium, which would be incredible. Before we dive into that, just talk to us about your background. Like, how did you end up in self-storage? Tell us more about Storage Pro.
Sure. Great story, I think. 1985, graduated from college and moved west and started working for a development company. And quickly, within a year, there was a 1986 Tax Reform Act. And that basically took passive losses and made them you had to capitalize the passive losses. That was beyond my pay grade at that time. All I know is I walked into the office building one day and everybody was laid off except for myself. And why? Because I was in the process of building our first self-storage facility. And thanks to Public Storage, they were acquiring a piece of property that we owned. They taught us all the tips and tricks as to how to build the storage, and the underwriting and what needed to be done, and all the feasibility and viability reasons that you need to look out for. And we're starting to build our first storage facility, and it was a income producing business rather than a loss. So they wanted to keep anybody that was doing self-storage, and I was the only guy doing the self-storage. I got to keep my job. So fast forward, worked there for probably 4 more years, and built 12 or 13 properties with them. Wow. Moved on, and I said, you know what? I'm tired, because I was fighting with Public Storage every day. They'd find out where I was traveling, more or less. And before I knew it, I could come home to the office and say, hey, I found a property. Public Storage was buying that property, and they were in contract. So it was a war zone for a couple of years. And I was like, I'm done with self-storage. I'm not going to do it. Well, when I left the company, I had already made a decision to get into the property management side of the business, and started a management company. And we did feasibility and viability studies. And wow. Luckily, at the same time, there's a gentleman by the name of Jerry Mooney. He was the first self-storage consultant on the West Coast. And he said, Steve, I'm retiring. You're young. Here's my business. Here's my Rolodex of all my clients. It's yours. And the rest is history.
That is incredible. All right, so let's back up for a minute. So you said you moved out west in 85. Where'd you move from?
I grew up in upstate New York.
All right. And then where was the first site? So you're doing this one site back in 86. Where was that at?
Tracy, California. It's now.
Really?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. What a godsend to be in self-storage that long ago. So I can only imagine the things you've seen the changes on. So you get into what a blessing too, to have this gentleman go, hey, here's my business. So tell us a little about Storage Pro, and what are you currently doing right now at Storage Pro?
Sure. In 1990, when I left the company, everybody said, why are you running from this, great business model? And as I said, I was a little tired of doing real estate development, and started my company, and it was Mirabito, Mooney and Associates, and doing feasibility studies, consulting, and management. And then about 3 or 4 years later, one of my clients said, hey, Steve, you want to be building storage facilities? And I said, well, you find the sites and I'll build them. And so for the last, 30 years, this is what we've done is my partner finds the sites, and I build the sites, and then we manage the properties.
You didn't tell me that when we first met, because I was under the impression that Storage Pro was ultimately mostly a third-party management system. So you're doing development and the third-party management piece.
That's correct. Yeah. And then probably about 2000, we owned, 3 or 4 properties and realized that, we have to brand it, and we branded it, the property Storage Pro. And fast forward another 10 years, 2010, I realized it's like, wow, there's a lot of consolidation going on in the industry, and very similar to what I grew up in the grocery business. My dad owned a small grocery store, and he was inundated with massive competition from the big public companies. And this is back in the early 70s when there's a lot of inflation, protests. I remember people picketing out in front of my dad's grocery store because meat prices went up. And, like my dad had anything to do with it. It's out of his control. But what was happening there as a result of inflation was there's a lot of consolidation in the grocery industry. I think the grocery industry is one of the worst industries you'd ever want to get into because there's compression from all different angles. Building size, competition. You look at the competition in the grocery industry. You've got it from a drugstore to a liquor store to everybody sells food and is competing with you. So I saw what happened in the 70s with my dad's grocery store, and he said, Steve, he says, I need help and I need technology. Fast forward 2010, I'm like, wow, the self-storage industry is just like the grocery industry. I need technology and I need help. And I recognized the help was not just more people. We had great people working at Storage Pro, but I needed to bring on third-party management in a big way so that it would help my properties succeed. And at the same time, we would help the third-party clients succeed. And it's been a wonderful masterpiece as a result of that.
Wow.
My clients have succeeded beyond their expectations, and we've been able to grow a model that provides customers with the latest technology, the best-in-class management, the systems, the procedures, everything that is needed to be competitive in today's market.
How big is your portfolio? Like how many stores are you currently managing for?
We're closing in on close to 150 right now, everywhere from Denver west to the Pacific Ocean.
Perfect. So I want to get into that in a moment, but I got to share with you, like, you have no idea how much I wish I could take your 1985 to today experience and somehow just download that into my brain. So the reason we want to do this podcast, and we'll get into what you're hearing from across the country with the people you're managing sites for, but let's start with the cities and why they need self-storage. We see these moratoriums happen. As I mentioned a moment ago, Indio may actually lift theirs. If I was a city commissioner or a planning commissioner, what would be your pitch to me if, like, I'm saying to you, hey, Steve, you know what? There's no real taxes. You guys don't really employ anybody. Like, I don't need any more self-storage. What's your pitch to me on why I should change my mind?
Well, nor do we need more retail. And most cities are thinking and dependent upon retail, larger cities on office space. And all of a sudden, in the next couple of years, I think they're going to face some economic challenges because of relying strictly on retail and office, especially when office vacancies are in the 50% range. There's going to be a reassessment of tax rules, and there's and fewer people are going into the stores. So there's fewer needs for dry cleaners. There's fewer needs for, car repair because you don't need to go drive your car anymore. So I'm going to suggest that the cities need to rethink their future, and where self-storage comes in vitally important is that we are a logistically driven society today. We've got Amazon at our fingertips. Everything we want it immediately, and we can't wait for. Well, the self-storage industry is providing that the ingredients for that logistics type business. I look at storage as a logistics business. We are providing, last mile accommodations for storage needs within a city. So a city should be questioning, why is self-storage so popular and in such high demand? And they might find that there's a lot of businesses that we are serving, and there's a lot of home businesses that we're serving. And this is their first opportunity to be able to expand outside of their homes into a no credit asked warehouse situation. They're able to move product into the storage industry or into the storage unit. We're not asking for credit. We're not asking for a long-term contract. All we're asking for is a month-to-month agreement. And cities should be noticing that this is the trend, the logistics-driven market and business that we're evolving into as a society in the United States. And the self-storage industry is delivering and is the backbone to that service.
Do you have any data? Because I had this conversation recently with Anne-Marie DeCoster, and we talked about how what's so great about self-storage, it acts as like a small business incubator, which is you're alluding to. And I'm from the Midwest, back in North Dakota, and we always talked about the power of putting a dollar in the farmer's hand. Because if the farmer spends a dollar, it 10x's in our community, right? So do you have any data by chance that shows, hey, because we're helping incubate these small businesses, it's increasing employment or tax revenue or anything of that nature?
Yeah, I wish I did, and that's the importance of self-storage association is to compile that type of information. Anecdotally, I can tell you, just sitting in an office and watching the types of people and businesses that pass through. I've got a facility, I know in the middle of the night, warehousing traffic is coming in and going. They've got trucks coming in and going all night long. And they take up several of our large storage spaces. So it's whether it's a residential user, they may say they're a residential user, but unless they're in the process of moving or remodeling their home, chances are they need that extra space because they've got a business that's occurring in their household. It may be a startup business, it may be work from home situation, whatever it is. A lot of business is generated because of this, as I call it. We're a last minute mile business for everybody.
Any other reasons you can think of why a city should say yes to self-storage?
Well, if we're going to be a green society, pushing self-storage to the next city over or outside of the urban limits does not help, because it's going to just strictly, all our customers are coming from within a couple of miles. So if we can't build in inner cities or center city, and we're being pushed out beyond, that means it's forcing all these people living in apartments and higher dense neighborhoods having to have a vehicle, drive, further miles to get to their product. So the self-storage industry is basically the extra room that you don't have at your house. And I think one big statistic that the home industry doesn't want to tell you, or the home building industry doesn't want to share with you, but the average home size is down about 20%, I believe, in the past decade. Well, that's called shrinkflation, according to our president, and nobody's accommodating that shrinkflation in homes other than the self-storage industry.
That was so well said. It's not just your Wheaties that are going through shrinkflation, it's the home as well. But I like what you said about multifamily. Marcus and Millichap recently did an interesting presentation around how millennials use storage versus, the baby boomers and millennials. For them, it's like an extra closet. So for multifamily developers in cities, you think, hey, I would want storage close by so I don't have stuff strewn all over my porches or in the driveways. And so I think there's a really nice amenity to have the self-storage there to keep things looking clean and fresh. So you mentioned you're managing about 150 or so storage units across not units, but stores across the country, mainly the western part of the states. There is a big conversation happening. Well, let me ask it this way. What's the most pressing problem or the thing you're hearing the most from the people that you're managing? Like, what are their biggest concerns right now in the storage world?
I think digital relevance and presence is extremely important, meaning a website that is working and is dynamic and is designed to attract customers. We were the first in the nation when the pandemic struck. I made the decision probably 6, 8 months ago before that to change website technology, and we became the first in the nation to have full rental leases all the way from, a customer could just log on and rent their unit without even dealing with a customer. We
Wow.
turned that button on, and the following week, COVID hit. And one of my clients said, "Steve, this is great technology, but we won't need it for years to come." And they love me today because we implemented that technology.
Now, how robust is what you're offering your clients? I mean, is it down to the point from an accounting standpoint that, hey, I can just send all this data to my accountant, he can give me my K1s, my depreciation as well, or is that not part of your software?
It's a fully integrated accounting service. So we do everything, distribute all the way, paying the bills to distributions on a monthly basis to all the partners. So we're pretty much tracking the entire partnership of each property, and then we deliver to their accountant the GL at the end of the year with the trial balances, and let him or her prepare the K1s and audit through if they wish.
Wow. What are you hearing from clients in regards to the big conversation right now? There was a webinar today, thanks to Yardi Matrix. They're talking about it too, but where you see the REITs just slashing public rates from a standpoint, because they want to obviously acquire customers. I get it, their strategy, but they acquire the customer. Once the customer gets in, then they start to, rapidly increase the rates. What are you hearing from some of your clients about that?
I have not heard one good thing about that, and I'm extremely concerned about that behavior. I think Wall Street should be scared and frightened by these tactics and practices that are happening by the larger operators that happen to be corporate or publicly owned. And I wrote an article in the Mini Messenger magazine last fall regarding this matter. So I walked away from the Self Storage Association conference in Las Vegas last year in 2023, and I heard so many independent owners complaining about that practice. So I did a little bit of studying, and I ultimately ended up writing the article for the magazine. I look at it this way. I grew up, in a grocery business in upstate New York, and my dad was not a big operator. He's a small independent operator. He didn't have the sophistication and the technology and all the widgets and what have you. But what I learned from that is, for every action, there's a equal and opposite reaction. And I'd ask him, I said, "Dad, how come this is happening? Or why is this law? That's wrong, and you shouldn't have to do this." He says, "Steve," he says, "people in New York City, are causing problems. And as a result of that, what happens in New York City ends up becoming a law for the entire state of New York." And the same thing is happening in the self-storage industry. If the big operators and REITs don't clean up this practice, we are going to have, I believe they will have lawsuits and litigation, as well as a lot of attorney generals looking down their throats.
Wow. Back up to your comment around Wall Street should be concerned. What do you mean specifically?
Why are they being complicit in allowing and not recognizing these business tactics and how they're impacting the industry? Every other industry in this country is regulated. Why would they not? Why would any government association or any government agency not look at what they're doing and come after the large public REITs?
I mean, yeah, to speak to what you're sharing, I didn't peruse the article, but I did see a headline in regards to, in Texas of all states, there was the potential of some legislation coming forth around trying to cap what the rate growth could be and things like that. So, I mean, the more you can stay out of the legislature, the better. So, I definitely don't want any of us going down that road. Anything else you want to add there?
You're right, and why would you got to put yourself in the customer's shoes? And yes, they are absolutely correct. They can, the operators can definitely increase occupancy by not uh, acknowledging or footnoting that this is only a temporary rate, because they're offering it at a at 50 cents on the dollar. Any consumer would say, yeah, absolutely, I'm going to go buy that because it's I'm getting it at 50 cents on the dollar. I if they the challenge and the problem is by not disclosing it up front, it puts the smaller operators like myself who disclose that, hey, we're going to give you a screaming deal for the next 6 months, but this is your normal rate and you will be paying this normal rate, come, the end of the 6 month period. What's going on right now by these large operators, I find it disgraceful. And yeah, it's legal, but it's only legal until it gets challenged, and it will get challenged.
Boy, I hope that's not the case. And I remember being at SSA as well, and a gentleman from Extra Space was there. It was right after the big merger, and he's like, "Look, this is what we're doing. This is a way for us to acquire customers. We can lower the rates." I will share this from an anecdotal standpoint. There was some conversation around some independent owners were like, they started to say the words antitrust, and I was like, okay, that's an interesting perspective on it, but that's where some people were headed. If you want to comment on that, great. Otherwise, I just want to talk a little bit more about development with you. So,
Because I'm a very opinionated person, but I don't see it as antitrust. I see it as just poor business practices that will beg for legislative action.
fair. Okay. Let's talk about development. So, how many sites over your incredible career have you developed?
Wait, that's a good question. Probably 25, 30 properties.
So, through your experience and all the numbers you've seen and the stuff you've built, what are the top one or two, maybe three metrics you focus on as you make a decision about, okay, we're going to buy the dirt, we're going to build here? Like, what are the most important aspects for you?
Sure. It's gotten so much more complicated and more sophisticated over the years, but I'd say the top three is our investment yield. We're going to leverage the property, but where is the yield? And I've seen those yields, compress over the years. Every year it got smaller and smaller, and it's challenging to make deals really work today. That's probably the top key right there.
And would you say it's mainly construction costs, the price of the dirt, like what the competition? What do you think is most affecting the compression of the yields?
Construction costs have skyrocketed. I'm embarrassed to say that when I started in the industry, I believe that Tracy, California facility cost $14 a square foot to build. Okay, and today, that same property is probably easily $110 a square foot. That's hard cost. That's just the building the sticks and bricks of getting it built. But yeah, the price of storage construction has gone up, what, 10 times, right?
Yeah. And then one of the things we've talked about here before on the show, which I'm sure you're aware of this, but like I've talked to some GCs and a lot of people are wondering, hey, when are these costs going to come down? And then he and I were having a good conversation about, there's $750 billion sitting in state coffers. That's going to go a lot towards infrastructure. There's $1 trillion out there from the infrastructure bill. So when you think about building that many roads and bridges and whatnot, like construction costs aren't going down anytime soon. So it's going to continue to make it challenging to make things pencil.
I've never seen in 35 years in this business construction costs ever drop. Okay, maybe labor costs. If there's a recession and you're building in the middle of a recession, yeah, you can. There are a lot of subcontractors out there just buying a job. But in terms of material cost, we're in a global market for materials. So it's not just a regional cost for buying concrete or buying rock. It's a commodity. These are all commodities. Copper. I'm always looking at price of copper, what's going on, or the steel, to understand, are there going to be some constraints in it? So we're in a global market for raw materials, and prices don't drop. I also think that that's some of the inflation that does not get reported. When we see 2 or 3 or 4% inflation rates, we're not reporting the fact that cost of raw materials for new buildings are going up at 10 or 15% overnight.
So I'm curious, as you're looking at, I don't know how much data you see from your clients, but even from your own sites, there's this big conversation on regards to where rates are at from a people moving standpoint, right? I mean, if you've got a 3% mortgage, 4% mortgage, there's not a real big incentive for you to move when rates are at 7.5%. So you see demand dropping dramatically throughout many parts of the country. Do you believe that we have hit a bottom at these rates, or is there still more room for them to go down?
I'm not an economist, but my concern is that hopefully they won't go up. But I just look at the 10-year Treasury.
And I apologize. When I mean rates, I meant I should have been more clear. I meant like the rental rates, because there's people out there right now that are saying, "Hey, I think we're seeing the low on these rental rates for self-storage. I think we're going to start to see more people moving. They're going to get more acclimated to where mortgage rates are at." Do you think we're at a low point here for rental rates for self-storage? Is there more room for them to go down?
I think we're at the bottom. It's the discounting is so our new customers are coming in at lower rates, promotional rates, for a much longer extended period of time. They're getting, so you need storage, rent it now, because you can get a whale of a deal on storage. I don't think they're going to bottom any further. There's no race to the bottom. It's just, as you said, when you've got a 3% home loan, why move? You can't afford to move. And that really has stalled out the storage demand in most communities as a result.
Yeah. Steve, it sounds like you might be building your own self-storage site right there on location. So I want to give you a chance. I want to give you a chance to just give the last word. If people want to reach out to you and find more about Storage Pro, how do they do that?
Sure. Be happy to. It's Storage Pro Management. We're based in Walnut Creek, California. We're one of the largest, number 10 operator of storage facilities in the nation, and we'd love to talk at www.storagepromanagement.com.
Great stuff. Steve Mirabito, again, president and founder of Storage Pro, big part of California Self-Storage Association. We just appreciate the time and the insight. So thank you very much.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.